right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday Forum. Good to see you, and a good wave to those who are joining us online. My name is Thomas Diaz. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm on staff here as the Director of Connection and Care. We have a very special forum to present to you all this morning. Today, this Sunday, we are celebrating both the joy and celebration of Juneteenth and our continuation of Pride Month here at All Saints Church. So today's forum is geared for us to talk about the intersection of Black and queer liberation on this Juneteenth and Pride observance. Today we're going to explore the intersection of what these two pivotal moments for society, what it looks like, and how it actually informs the church to continue to do the work of both liberation and inform who we are as beloved children of God. So that is what we're kind of going to explore this morning. And I am so honored, and it's a privilege for all of us here at All Saints Church to welcome the Reverend Carla from the Diocese of Olympia to be with us and to explore these topics with us. So thank you, Reverend Carla, for being with us this morning. If you can please just introduce yourself, tell us a little about your role as the canon for multicultural ministries in community transformation.
That's pretty good because most folks don't get that right off the bat. Good job.
I try to memorize that title, and it's an interesting title, so I want to hear more about it and what you're doing in the Diocese of Olympia.
So first off, I do want to bring you greetings from your siblings in the Diocese of Olympia. Our diocese basically encompasses that part of Washington State from the border with Oregon to the border with Canada, from the Cascade Mountains to the sea. So that's the western part of Washington. Most of our congregations are in and around the Seattle area, although we've got congregations who are on the border of Oregon and on the border of Canada, an amazing mix of people. When I used to think of the folks that were out in the Northwest, that upper left-hand corner, I would say, oh, I suspect there's people out there. They're probably Sonic fans because being a basketball person, that's what I really knew. But when I landed there and began to get a sense of the diversity that is in that region, that was an eye-opener for me. So when I came to the Episcopal Church, and we'll tell a little bit about that story later, that was something I brought with me, was this sense of, wow, we have this amazing diverse community that we're in, but our church doesn't look like the community that it's in. And so I stepped into this place where I begin to encounter other leaders, incredible folks, one of which is actually right here. Alfredo is a person I got the chance to work with. We were in our Circles of Color together. But when I landed there, I thought, wow, I want to work with a community that wants to do that work of inclusion and justice. Got to work with the Reverend Jerry Shigaki as his administrative assistant. Became ordained in 2009, went to do parish work. In the meantime, our work as a church was not advancing. Later, and I'll tell the story in a little more detail, the communities of color came together to form what we call the circles of color, to actually push our diocese and say, hey, we talk about our stuff in our baptismal covenant. We talk about, justice, and we talk about dignity of every human being. We talk about that, but what are we doing about it? So part of what has came out of that is a new emphasis on racial justice and inclusion in our diocese, and as a part of that, this position was created, the Canon for Multicultural Ministry and Community Transformation. We intentionally said both because we found out as we kind of were talking to people that when folks were hearing multicultural ministry, what they were hearing was, oh, black and brown people. She's going to take care of the black and brown people. And they weren't getting the impact. No. This is all of us, the real all of us. And so I really don't care if you're in this little bitty congregation where you say that there's no people of color around. You are involved in multicultural ministry and community transformation. Yes, you are. So one of the reasons that we linked those two together was for that, and it's a job I've been in all of 1 year. I will close my introduction by saying, and I have to announce this with deep sadness, I have been in this position for 1 year now, over a year and a month. In 13 months, I have to tell you that I have not eliminated racism. But then I remember, wait a minute, that's not my job, that's our job. My job is to assist us and to give leadership to that, which is what I've had the great opportunity to do in our diocese.
Amen to that, right? Yeah, thank you for describing the title. And so I want to hear more now about your vocation into what drew you into the church. What risks did you take answering the call to your vocation? What have been some challenges that you faced, and what are some milestones that you have experienced?
The story of vocation starts in the Lutheran Church. I was born and raised in an amazing all-black congregation in Cleveland, Ohio. It was a church that was a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Some of you might be scratching your heads and saying, wait a minute, how do black folk end up in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? Well, I'll tell you how. Down in the South, when there was such a thing as a synodical conference, and there were folks saying, how can we as a people grow? Answer, what we want, education. Thankfully, Booker T. Washington said to Rosa Parks, an amazing woman in Alabama, you want schools? You know, these Lutheran folks are building schools, day schools, elementary schools. Black folks said, sign me up for that. Got engaged with the Lutheran Church because of education. My parents come out of that work because and when a number of other folk began to do that northern migration, you know, my old pastor used to say, you know, we went from being down south to being up south. So, you know, we came up to these northern cities. And what we found was that you could only have a church, there was a special church for us. You know, you had to go to one of the Negro missions, a special church. Well, St. Philip grew out of that. And that church was my home church. That's where I was baptized and taught and nurtured and learned. That's where I experienced worship that included everything from gospel music to box music, everything from the beauty of a liturgical center to the liveliness of black preaching. And I thought that's what church was. I thought that's church everywhere, only to find out, oops, okay, well, maybe not so. But the community there nurtured me, taught me. And out of that community came a desire to serve God. Now, the church helped me do that. College, seminary, graduated, served. About 9 years into that ministry, I had to face a painful truth. I was up front talking about truth and integrity, but I wasn't living that way. I was denying who I was as a transgender person, and it got to the point where it didn't make sense to talk about truth and integrity while not embracing who I am. Well, standing up and doing that meant that my church body said, there's the door. Don't let the doorknob, and you know the rest. So I had to leave my church. I had to leave. After 9 years of being a pastor, I left. It was an emotional disaster. I will say a little bit about it in my sermon today. But what it did was I thought that was the end not only of ministry, I thought it was the end of my relationship with God. Somehow or other, God we had our fight. And the result of the fight was that, okay, we're going to stay in relationship, but I need something to make this happen. And for me, I needed communion. I needed that. I said, now, if you can give me communion and you can keep the church, then we're fine. Only to find out, I'm sorry, that's not the way it goes. You know, this is not your personal property. This is the community. So I had to stumble into a church that would accept me for who I am, would love the beauty of Eucharist, and would center its work in that. The Episcopal Church. I stumble into the Episcopal Church, immediately find home, but I knew that, no, ordained ministry, no, that's never going to happen. That door is closed. One of the deacons one day leans over an altar and says, you know, you're going to think this is crazy, but I think you should consider discerning for holy orders. I said, I think you're wrong. She said, well, maybe, but can you pray and move a little bit on it? And I did. We have a long process in our church. I mean, it's long, okay? And I kept waiting at any moment for somebody to just say, okay, Carla, thank you for applying, but no, but black and trans? No. It never happened. Somehow or other, I came to the actual ordination thing. I was still waiting, because, you know, they ask a question when you get ordained here. You know, can anybody give any just cause why this ordination should not have? I was cringing, because I'm waiting for someone to stand up, but they didn't. So now ordination happens, and I find myself in this welcoming church. I start a call in a very small parish, which failed. So here I am, I'm the priest of a church that failed. Would you like to know how easy that made it for me to take my next call? And at one point there were 12 straight no's. And part of me is scratching my head and saying, what's the problem? Is it because I'm black? Is it because I'm trans? Is it because I'm a woman? What? That's when I really discovered intersectionality and how those things happen. So that's a little bit of how that process happened.
Wow. Carla, thank you for sharing that with us, which is a good transition to going on about that intersection of Black and queer liberation. How would you define that with your lived experience?
I tell people now that when it comes to where I live at the intersection of Queer Street and Black Boulevard. That's where my life happens. And in that intersection, I discovered a number of things that crash into each other at that intersection, and some things that come together in that intersection. One of the intersectional pieces is how to be known. All I got to do is walk into a place, and you know I'm black. In fact, what I thought was really funny is I had gone into a room in which the very first person I met was sight impaired, could not see at all. It's told me that they were vaguely able to see light. They listened to me for about 20 seconds, told me I was black. So I walk into a place, that's an identity that is present and up front. I may walk into that same space and people may not know that I'm trans. So there's this place about where one is known and a choice, and a whole nother place where there's no choice. So part of my intersectionality is saying that there are intersections of personality where it's a crash, where they are just in contrast. And for the church to honor those contrasts and honor those crashes. There are also moments where they are together. When I stop and think of one of the things I'm going to say today, I will reference both Juneteenth as a moment in which liberation was delayed. I will talk about Stonewall as a moment where liberation was denied. So there are these common experiences while there are these divergent experiences. So when I go into how does this work for me theologically, sometimes that means I have to talk about the obvious experiences, the obvious contrasts. And then sometimes I got to raise the stuff that's hidden. And so you end up with that whole piece from Jesus. I have come to reveal the stuff that's in the dark so that everything might be in the light. So I'd say my theological place of intersectionality starts with recognizing the places of divergence and convergence and being able to speak effectively from those places.
Right. And what would you say, which is beautiful, I think those are a great way to describe them, and how does the church inform that work?
The church has at its core the Jesus story. It's the Jesus story that we tell ourselves all the time. And we even get to the point where we have this, for us in our liturgical world, we've got this Holy Week in which we just hone in. This is the Jesus story. It's the story of a man who is arrested on trumped up charges, tried using rules that actually break the laws of the people who were trying him. He is tortured by law enforcement. The state turns its back on him and says, we don't really care. Kill him if you want to. He's executed. Some would say lynched. This is the Jesus story. And for me, when you talk about where we're going to start our theology, that's where we got to start it. It's not even just right there. I mean, he comes into the world. I'm sorry, I'm going to start preaching. I don't want to be preaching.
Go for it.
But even we Episcopalians, we love incarnational theology. We love that. That makes us go. Christmas is all about it. God becoming flesh, the real stuff. Well, when God became flesh, God chose to be a poor baby and a homeless child. That's the truth of the Jesus story. So when I'm talking about where the church starts, it doesn't have to go far. It's not like the church has to go find some other tradition. It's right there. For me, the work is helping our church connect to that, realizing that, oh yeah, this is the Jesus story. This is our Jesus. This is his story. And then begin to say, okay, well now if that's his story, where are you hearing the echoes of that story? Where else are you hearing stories that sound like that? So for me, that's both places, a place of beginning as well as an underpinning of where the church goes in ministry.
Right. And I'm hearing too that I think often the church comes into this place of a disconnect, right, to the narrative into which we are grounded in. And we really do enjoy both the pageantry and the presentation of Holy Week, and it draws folks in, and we enjoy it. We do. But I think you're hitting on something very important, and that is it's the story that every year we come to. And it almost begs the question, one, are we willing to listen to the story? Not just go through the motions, but actually listen to the story. And secondly, as you're saying, we're that incarnational spirit that we hold as Episcopalians, are we actually willing to embody it? And both, I think, in our individual call to ministry and however that is fulfilled, and as participants in the church, right? So given this particular intersection now of both Juneteenth and Pride happening all in 1 month, which is, I don't know, that's kind of holy right there. Like there's something there, right? And I still think we're still kind of unpacking it because, Juneteenth still well, as the federal government's going to say, newish, because it's only 2021, but let's get real, right? And then Pride being 54 years, I think we're discovering that there still is a disconnect in society.
Mhm.
So, how do we combat that? How do we start getting folks more online and connected into these both, narratives of, yeah.
I remember, because I'm old, people, old, okay. So I'm old enough to remember the biting edge of the civil rights movement and how important that was for Black people. I'm also old enough to remember that as that movement was going where it was going, even in my little bitty churches in Cleveland, Ohio, there's in the Black church, we got secret. Now, you gotta promise to only tell this to everybody. We will love up on our musicians while we don't love up on who they love up. That is a truth in our church. That is a truth in our church. And I pick on our musicians, but it's not, of course, not just our musicians. It's that important thing that, well, yeah, we're church, we're family, we're Black together, we're down with each other, but we don't know about y'all over there. It was a struggle for a lot of Black churches to look over and say, well, Pride, that's not us. That's not our business. See, that's over there, and Black folks are over here. And so what I end up doing is I have to remind my own people of the Jesus story. Well, now, because we want that story. Believe me, we want it, and we own it, and it is our story. A story of suffering, rejection, of being pushed away, of being put down. That's our story. Guess what? That's the story at Stonewall, too. Pushed away, put down, rejected, hurt, beat, killed. So for me, part of the joining of that gap means taking a risk to start saying stuff that might not be particularly fun to hear. It also means that I have to go to my queer community and say, see us over here with this color skin? See us? We are together in this struggle. We are together. We cannot be pushed out of that community either. So those are two tough places. But again, the Jesus story is the place where they can both find some commonality and find some connection. Sorry, I'm starting to preach.
No, I mean, come on, we're on to something here. Yeah. So let me add another intersection, and I want you to personally, speak to our trans siblings, and we know what's going on out there. It's ugly. It's awful. I have two questions that maybe you can figure out how to respond to. That is, what is your message to the trans community, and what would Jesus say?
So I'm going to start with a piece of my own story that leads to theology. In 1999, I left my position as a pastor in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It felt like I died that day. I lost a community. I lost not just a job, I lost a vocation, a profession. I lost my friends and my peers. It felt like dying. In fact, I started to call that day the day that Nice Guy died. Because that was pretty much it for my life pretending to be male. And so now my life begins to move and transition on. And I'm in church one Sunday about 4 or 5 years later. And it's Lent, and it's about the day. And the lessons that day, the first one is this lesson where God tells his prophet Samuel, "Are you still mourning for Saul? I have moved on from Saul and have anointed a new king. Fill your horn with oil and go anoint him." The gospel lesson for that day is the raising of Lazarus. So here I am, I'm there thinking about the day that nice guy died, and it's like hearing God say, "Are you still mourning for Saul? I'm moving on. Here's your oil. Come and anoint a new living person." That was at that moment that I realized, oh dear Jesus, I'm an icon of the resurrection. A life that's died and a new life that's come. It was like, I'm what resurrection looks like. And so I look at my trans siblings and I say, we are an icon of resurrection. We are
Come on
an
now.
icon of resurrection. Now, of course, the beautiful thing is, so is everybody else. But to look at that experience and see it, again, as a part of the Jesus story is where I would start. Now, having started there, what's the word? The word is that there are communities that support us. And it is critical that we stand with those communities and that those communities stand with us. All Saints is one of those kind of communities. It's a place where I don't want to preempt the sermon because the sermon's coming on this stuff. But not only is our work to stand with our trans siblings, but it is also to be a place of healing for our trans siblings. Because I'm telling you, I will never forget the day that I walked into my church and I saw standing out on the lawn a bunch of people with signs. Maybe you've encountered folks like this. And one of their signs said, "God hates fags." And I remember being so scared. I was frightened. I couldn't get inside that church fast enough because I knew in there I was safe. So being a community of that kind of safety, especially for people that aren't feeling safe out there, is so critical.
Absolutely, yes. And that is kind of the season we find ourselves right now, too, as a parish. And often I hear from my queer siblings that, whatever happens outside is one thing, but there is that sense of safety. And not only safety often here once they're inside our sanctuary, but that they're just relieved that they can just be in their humanity and sense it. And I always like to say, too, we celebrate your humanity as soon as you walk into our doors. It's just an automatic. You don't even have to question it. It's just there, right, in that presence. My cue to you all, I'm going to come to you for questions next. I'll have one more question for Carla, so start thinking of your questions. And what inspires you to do well, obviously Jesus is that one inspiration there in the core of what you do, but what inspires you as Carla?
What makes me go is this amazing sense of love that fills me and overflows. I'd love to say I'm creating it, but I'm not. But that's what gets me going. I mean, it's the thing that when I'm not just tired, but when I'm scared, when I'm pissed, when all this stuff is happening, that's what keeps me going. I know now maybe I don't know if this sounds like some kind of religious pie in the sky, whatever it is, but this love stuff really means something. Knowing that the God who is the God of everything and who is far away into parts of the universe that we will never know, even though we have seen so much further than we've ever seen, is also concerned about me. love gets me going and keeps me going. And when I'm forgetting about it, there's a community that reminds me of it.
There you go. Beloved community. Amen to that. Thank you, Carla, for that. All right, turning to you all. Questions, just raise your hand. I will come to you. Unique.
Thank you so much, Reverend Carla. That was just, when you talked about Lazarus and how that touched my soul, because I think we've all been in that space, but I think particularly the trans story is so, it is a rebirth, right? You talked about being on the intersection, and I love intersectionality too, of, what was it, Queer Street and Black Boulevard? And so, Black Boulevard, right? And I'm on Woman Avenue in Black Boulevard, so I feel that, right? So, when you, within the church, because even in the Episcopal Church, you know, we're more progressive, but there are sometimes some challenges. Within those two pieces of your identity, which ones have you felt the most resistance, struggle within the church? And can you separate the two? That was from him.
I'm not sure if I can separate the two, but I can say the one that I'm constantly pushed on, and that's the trans piece, which always kind of surprises me. But then again, you know, I'm old, you know, and I, you know, grew up in Ohio where the whole black-white thing kind of plays out differently. But it was the trans piece. You know, consistently I will run into folks in the church who will say to me, well, I guess it's okay. And there's a sense of almost just don't know. I mean, but then again, I will say this. So I get that in terms of my push there. But like I say, when I walk into a place, the first identity that's hitting people is, there's this black person. And so I sometimes wonder, because, you know, when I was getting those 12 no's in a row, part of me, I said, well, you know, which is it? What part of me is a problem here? You know, I kind of felt, you know, like, what is this, the line from Souls of Black Folks? How does it feel to be a problem? And so the trans piece is the one that people will talk to me most about. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll go here first and then to you, Patrick.
Hi, my name's Martin. Thank you very much. I came in, you were already speaking, so forgive me for missing the beginning. I'm a gay man, that's why I identify. One of the questions I have around that is hard for me, and I got this from my mother. My mother used to say, if God was a female, we wouldn't be in the problems we're in. So, my question for you is taking on to your true identity now. I'm going to say Reverend Carla. I would assume it's more identified, maybe female, maybe not. Question for you from me is, how can the church go, and I know this church does go more female, because as a gay man, I identify as a man or whatever, but there is from a kid, a strong female, to use those kind of separate things. How has that affected you now taking, you got it? Thank you.
That's a good question, because when I came out of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, this was a church body that does not ordain women, still does not ordain women. There is no other language for God other than male language. So that's what I grew up with. You know, God was basically male. Leadership in the church was male, and that's just kind of how religion worked. It was a male thing, and women were kind of in the background, you know, doing the background stuff. I landed in the Episcopal Church, and one of the first things I noticed is I go to my first Episcopal service, and I look up front, and there's a female priest. Okay. And, you know, and I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. How does that work? And see, this is at the point where I realize that you sometimes adopt the language and the ideals of a place where you're nurtured. And so I'm asking, how does that work? When that was actually not the question to be, the question would be asked was, why is it taking me so long to see how this works? But so part of it is imagery is important. What's up front is important. Who's up front is important. And the use of language, I was amazed when I landed at St. Mark's, the person who was the liturgist there, she had a practice of what she called expansive language. She said she wanted to use as much of the different kind of language about God that there is to use. And so, there was he, her, they, pronouns I hadn't even heard, ways of referring to God from, from the one who is dandling us on the knee and holding us at the breast. This is an image of God. Jesus, who says that he wants to gather he wants to gather all of Jerusalem. How? Like a hen gathers her chicks. So for me, one of the things that was really important for me was to hear the full range of language. Not just, okay, we're going to replace him with her, but we're going to use the whole stretch of language. And that's where I began to find myself. To be able to say that, okay, well, if I'm going to say God is male, okay, well, can I say God is female? Okay. Can I say God is trans? Well, okay. To be able to use that full length of language. And I think the church's language says a whole lot to people.
My name's Patrick. I'm so glad you're here. I went back and actually looked for a sermon to listen to before you came. And I found your Juneteenth sermon from a couple years ago on freedom, the intersection of freedom and healing. And first thing is, I'm just wondering if that still rolls around in your mind, in your heart. And then the other question I have is, that made me think a little bit about was, how do we know as members of a church, and how does staff know as leaders of the church, although we should be leaders too, how do we know how much discomfort we need to have in our lives to know that we are doing the work and feeling that pain? I think that Jesus' life modeled for us. And how do we fit that with that intersection of joy and just being happy in our lives too? Can you speak a little to that too?
I can, and actually it's a Juneteenth question that actually gets me at that. First off, healing and freedom just to me are hand in glove. I will never lose that connection in my way of understanding, because healing is so critical, especially to communities that have been wounded and beaten up. That is so. I think of freedom as not just, the right to go and do whatever the heck you want to do. I think of freedom more as this is our right to heal. Our right to heal. Interesting enough, when you talk about discomfort, a question got posed for me in my office around a church that was doing a Juneteenth celebration. They wanted to honor Juneteenth in their service. And they wanted to sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Okay? And I thought, this is great. Wonderful idea. Go, sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And the priest said, I want to tell you, I'm from the South, and I know a little bit about where that feels, and I'm a little uncomfortable singing that. And one of his black members told him, I'm a little uncomfortable, with a bunch of white folks singing. And it was funny because I had never thought of that. And, so suddenly I'm in a place of discomfort. I think, oh, okay, I'm listening to the story. I'm understanding. Oh, okay, I can see where you're coming from there. And so now I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to advise my peer in terms of, because Juneteenth, they were doing it Sunday. They didn't have a chance to do a 6-week series, They're going to sing the song today. So I told them, tell you what, talk to your choir members, talk to this guy, gather your black folks. There's 5 of us, come on, talk to us. Get some feedback and sit with the discomfort if there's discomfort. And then, okay, we're going to sing the song. Take a couple moments to say, hey, this is some of the things that are surfacing as we've been thinking about this song. They decided that what they would do is to, because their black members said, we want to sing the first verse. We'll stand up and sing the first verse. And then we invite the rest of the congregation to join us. But they sat in that discomfort. And so now, I admit that I actually just saw the text before I came down to this, that they did it. And there is rejoicing in joy. And now folks are still kind of like, ooh, okay, this discomfort is telling me that we still got some work to do. But they were able to kind of sit with it, experience it, and still spill over into some joy because now they've grown a little bit more. So I think it's those kind of things that are kind of the yin and yang, the back and forth. That's an example.
Awesome, thank you. Can we give Carla a hand for this amazing form? Thank you, Carla. All right, I see a question. We do need to get Carla ready to continue to preach. We'll continue on. Carla will be out greeting folks afterwards, so we'll do that for a moment. So maybe Pamela, if you can see if you... Okay, go. Okay. Yeah, amen. Thank you, Pamela. Yes, wise elder. Thank you, Pamela. To folks online, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in just a bit at 10 o'clock service.